like to begin by talking about why do we organize or why do we support the World Press Freedom Day. It has been touched upon by the two speakers before me. But let me bring 4 specific purposes of this day. One is, of course, that we heard from the speakers, is to celebrate the fundamental principles of press freedom. That media shouldn't be censored. People shouldn't be harassed for having an opinion. People shouldn't be condemned for writing something they believe is the truth. Second purpose is also to evaluate the freedom of press in the world, in Samoa, and not take it for granted. The third is to recognize that even in the most safest of societies, even in most liberal of societies, attacks on press freedom do take place. So while a country may be doing well in media freedom ranking, do not close your eyes to some attack, some intimidation that happens anyway. And the fourth reason is to pay tributes to those journalists, those media personnel like camera people or editors who have lost their lives in the line of duty. They may not be in Samoa, they may not be in the Pacific States, but it's a day that calls for solidarity. Attack on one is attack on all. That journalists are not targets. I will take the discussion that was started by the Electoral Commissioner about media's role in elections and in democracy, because that is the theme of the World Press Freedom Day this year. I would say media has 2 main functions or roles in relation to democracy and elections. Firstly, media has to facilitate information, and we heard about it, that if people, media personnel, do not sit through election counting process, they may not be able to provide the right information. That's just an example. Media also have, media people, media institutions also have a responsibility to support the right to information of the people. You are not writing an article only for someone who will pay for the newspaper and read it. You are writing with an objective, and that is to make sure everybody has a right to information and that right is respected. Second, you are providing analysis and information that may otherwise go unheard. It may be opinion of one. It may be opinion of a minority, but an opinion is always worth hearing. And both journalists and their media houses across the world in recent have been a subject to a wave of disinformation, what is popularly called fake news. And this, in reaction, has led to greater curtailment of press freedom. And this is, I would say, a dangerous trend for democracy and democratic governance. Journalists and free media provide the checks and balances which is fundamental for all democracies. They highlight government's failures or reporting on social injustices. These may sound boring, but this job needs to be done by somebody in a society, and this role falls on the fourth estate or the press, because media has to look at what needs to be improved. Media and journalists, they are not propaganda houses. They are not public relations offices. They are not public relations officers or communication officers. This distinction is essential to maintain. Otherwise, disinformation and publicity becomes the news. The second role is that by nature, media has to play the role of a watchdog. In this function, media in relation to elections has to expose the electoral process, whether it is fair or unfair. And this is essential for fostering the democratic norms and values. Cases of electoral misconduct, violence, disruption of electoral process, or violation of citizens' right to vote, their exclusion from the election process, their ability to give vote or contest election, these are all matters that should interest a free press. These are essential for democracy. And these two functions of media, one to critique governance and point out social injustices, and second, to play this watchdog role over the electoral process, in many parts of the world, costs some journalists their lives. To many journalists, it has meant imprisonment. And if you have followed through the news, today UNESCO has awarded what is regarded as the highest award for media to two journalists, Reuters journalists, who have been in prison for the last 7 years. Now, this may not happen in Samoa. This may not happen in many of the Pacific states. May happen a little bit in Fiji and in Papua New Guinea. But in what other forms intimidation happens?